Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. In today's video, we are going to discuss about on the most important topic in the world history, that is the Warsaw Pact. So we are going to discuss the definition, what actually was the Warsaw Pact, what is its history, and also what is its significance. Not only that, we are also going to discuss that how the Warsaw Pact has came to an end and what was the overall implications and after effect of the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact. But before, let us try to understand what was basically Warsaw Pact. So let us first try to understand what was Warsaw Pact. So Warsaw Pact was basically a kind of mutual defense agreement or mutual defense treaty that was signed between the erstwhile Soviet Union, also called as USSR, and the seven Soviet satellite nations or satellite countries of Eastern Europe. The pact was signed in the Warsaw, which is the capital of Poland, on the 14th of May 1955, and was finally disbanded in year 1991. Officially, the pact is also known by the other name of Treaty of Friendship, Cooperation and Mutual Assistance, and the alliance was proposed by the Soviet Union to counter the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, also known as NATO popularly, which was established in 1949. NATO was a kind of defense treaty or defense pact that was signed between US, Canada, and the Western European countries. So basically, the communist nations which were part of Warsaw Pact were referred as Eastern Bloc in the era of Cold War, while the democratic nations of the NATO made up the Western Bloc, and this was the term that was most commonly used during the Cold War period. Now let us first try to understand that which countries, the seven countries, were the member of the Warsaw Pact. So obviously the pact was largely driven by the Soviet Union, which was the largest country at that time and also most strongest country of that particular area. Apart from that, the member of Warsaw Pact were East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, which has now been broken into two different countries, Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic, and Hungary, Romania, as well as Bulgaria. So these were the seven countries that were part of the overall Warsaw Pact. Now, what was the idea or rationale behind the pact? So, when the NATO member the number of NATO members were increasing, and especially after the West Germany has joined NATO, the countries of the Soviet Union and its allied countries they decided that they need to defend any other member nations against any possible attack by the NATO member countries. The second objective was to respect each other's national sovereignty as well as the political independence, which was to a large extent neglected and was not followed by the Soviet Union. And third, and the most important part of this treaty was any member country will not interfere in each other's internal affairs. This is something that also has not been followed, and we see that even when the Warsaw Pact was very much active, Soviet Union has interfered strongly in the internal matters of different countries such as Hungary and Czechoslovakia. We'll discuss about that after some time. So let us first understand the historical background of NATO Pact, this Warsaw Pact. So it was in the month of January 1949, Soviet Union had formed a committee that is called as Comecon. The Comecon was abbreviated form of the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance. Now, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance was created mainly to facilitate the post-World War II recovery of the Eastern European countries that were under the influence of Soviet Union, and also allow the restructuring as well as the reconstruction of the buildings and all the infrastructural damage that these countries have witnessed during the World War II. However, on the 6th of May 1959, West Germany decided to join the NATO. As a result of that, just after a week, on the 14th May 1955, Soviet Union established Warsaw Pact, which was considered as mutual military defense complement of the Comecon. So basically, it has two wings. One was the economic wing, which was taken care of by the Comecon, and the other was the military wing, which was taken care of by the Warsaw Pact, as far as the Soviet Union and its relation with the satellite nations are concerned. Now, what was the rationale behind the establishment of the bloc? So, first of all, Warsaw Pact, the Soviet Union and its member and its allied countries believe that Warsaw Pact would help to contain the West Germany, because after the West Germany became a member of NATO, the rearmament of West Germany began, and also in the future, if there is any threat from the NATO member countries toward any kind of attack to the Soviet Union, such kind of threat can also be thwarted. Not only that, Soviet Union thought that by having a similar kind of pact, similar kind of agreement like NATO, they can negotiate and basically discuss NATO or have discussion with NATO on a level playing field. The second major objective was that such kind of pact and agreement will also help Soviet Union in reining in the growing civil unrest in the Eastern European countries, especially against the ills of the communism. And the third major rationale was that Soviet Union thought that it will also strengthen the ties between the Eastern European capitals and Moscow, and thus, in essence, it will help the USSR in having a de facto control over any kind of international relations matter or any kind of geopolitical matters in the Eastern European region. So it was these three rationales that had led finally to development and creation of the Warsaw Pact. Now, what are the major events that has happened when the Cold War was going between USA and USSR and when the Warsaw Pact and NATO both were existing side by side? So, three major events, historical events that we have to keep in mind. First of all, it was 1962 when we have discussed about the Cuban Missile Crisis in separate video. It was the crisis that is believed to be the point where both countries, USSR and USA, came very close to having a kind of nuclear war or a full-fledged war. However, fortunately, such acts were thwarted or such possibilities were thwarted by the intelligent decision taken by the leaders of both the countries. Then further year 1956, the Hungarian government revolted and they wanted to withdraw from the Warsaw Pact. Due to this, there is a large scale support also in all around the Hungary, and a lot of people come in support of this decision of government to withdraw from the Warsaw Pact. Seeing this as a threat to the overall bloc, Soviet Union invaded Hungary, and in that invasion, it crushed the revolt and also killed almost 2,500 Hungarian citizens and also stripped the Hungarian government from its power. Then the next important event happened in 1968 when the Prague Spring was in full swing in the Czechoslovakia, when the Czechoslovakian president decided to allow freedom to the press and also the government's surveillance of the citizens were decreased. So these were considered also as a threat by the then premier of Soviet Union, Leonid Brezhnev, and thus by help of all the member countries having a soldier of almost 250,000, he attacked Czechoslovakia, and thus this Prague Spring was also nipped in the bud. It is after this Czechoslovakian war, Czechoslovakian invasion, Brezhnev gave a doctrine that is famously called as Brezhnev Doctrine. Under Brezhnev Doctrine, Soviet Union decided that any such decisions taken by the Eastern European countries, by any Eastern European countries, if it threatens the overall power or overall system of communism led by Soviet Union, then Soviet Union along with the Warsaw Pact members will have full right to invade and to interfere in the internal affairs of any country or any Soviet satellite states. That was the Brezhnev Doctrine. However, as time progressed, between 1968 to 1989, the gradually what we are seeing is the Soviet control over the Warsaw Pact satellite nation started to erode. Now, why this particular control started to erode? This we can understand because the communism was not a very successful economic model, and people were having very hard life under the communism. Not only that, due to the Soviet Union being the largest and most powerful nation that was part of Warsaw Pact, other countries and their interests were not taken into account or largely relegated by the Soviet Empire. And that is why there has been large scale protests that broke down in different countries of the Eastern Europe, where the communist government was basically what we can say forced to hand over power to the other form of governments. And it is due to this region that the control of Soviet Union over the Warsaw Pact members started to climb. Finally, the culmination point reached in the November 1989 when the Berlin Wall was fell down, and it also was followed by reunification of the Western Germany and Eastern Germany. This was a very much a strong blow to the Soviet Union because Eastern Germany was, as we have discussed, was under the influence of the Soviet Union, and the unification has caused the snatching away of Eastern Germany from the Soviet Union by the Western powers. Then next also what is happening at the same time as we discussed, there is large scale protests that has erupted in different countries of the Eastern Europe. So in countries where we have communist governments such as Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, East Germany, Romania and Bulgaria, the communist government started to fail, and thus finally changes were also being observed in the Soviet Union when the Mikhail Gorbachev became the premier of the USSR. It was during his reign, that the two very well-known policy of glasnost and perestroika were implemented in the Soviet Union, and as a result of this policy, which basically refers to openness and the economic reforms, a lot of freedoms were granted to press, a lot of freedoms were granted to the artists as well as the filmmakers. And due to this, the ills of the Soviet Union, the what we can say, the negative image of the Soviet Union that was still now hidden, is started to come out in a much more larger and grander manner. As well as the economic reform have also given a lot of powers to the people, and it's due to this region, this events that has happened, finally it has led to the decline of the USSR and the disintegration of USSR. Thus, on the 1st July 1991, it was the president of Czechoslovakia, Václav Havel. He formally declared the Warsaw Pact to be disbanded after 36 years of military alliance. And finally, also in December 1991, as we discussed, USSR or Soviet Union was officially dissolved to disintegrate into 13 or 14 different countries. And the largest country of Soviet Union was declared as a Russia, or Russia became successor of the Soviet Union, and it retained the seat in the United Nations Security Council as a successor of Soviet Union as well. However, as the Cold War gradually approached, end of the Cold War gradually approached, we can also see that significant changes has been witnessed, where the troops of once communist Warsaw Pact satellite states such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary, they fought alongside US-led forces, or we can say NATO-led forces, to liberate Kuwait in the first Gulf War in 1990. That means what we can see clear switching of alliance. That means earlier till Warsaw Pact was there, these countries were member of Warsaw Pact and were basically led by Soviet Union. Now they became and joined the US bloc or US-led bloc. So what has been the after effect of the dissolution of Warsaw Pact? That is also we have to keep in mind. So first of all, after the end of World War II, there has been a Soviet hegemony in the Central Europe as well as the Eastern Europe, which extended from the coast of Baltic Sea in the Baltic Sea all the way to the Strait of Istanbul, that is the Dardanelles Strait and the Strait of Marmara. This Soviet hegemony continued to decline between 1970 to 1990s, and after the collapse of Warsaw Pact, the decline has been quite tremendous, and Soviet control over the Eastern and Central Europe was kind of eroded. Second, due to the disbanding of Warsaw Pact, USSR also lost its excuse for stationing the Soviet military outside of its own border. As long as Warsaw Pact was existing, Soviet Union has placed the military in different countries. However, once Warsaw Pact has been disbanded, Soviet Union and later on its successor Russia has to withdraw all its troops to its own internationally recognized border. And third, we see increase in the purchase of more modern and capable arms from the Western nations, including the United States, especially among those countries which were earlier member of the Warsaw Pact, especially countries such as Poland, Czechoslovakia, as well as Hungary. And if you look at today's situation, all the countries which are earlier part of the Warsaw Pact has now joined NATO. So that is the changes that we have observed. In essence, what we can say in conclusion, that through Warsaw Pact, Moscow or the Soviet Union was trying to have a control over the seven satellite state of the Eastern and Central Europe. Though this control was never all encompassing, even at the heyday of the Warsaw Pact, it took a terrible toll on the societies and economies of the region that was home to over 120 million people. We can understand this. I told you earlier also that since these countries, though they were effectively under the control of Soviet Union, their interest was largely neglected on the expense of the interest of the Soviet Union. And that is why the people of these countries were not happy with such kind of arrangement. And that has caused so much revolt and revolution in these countries. And this we can understand that for two generations, as long as the Warsaw Pact lasted, the Poles, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, Romanians, Bulgarians, Germans, and all other nationalities which were living in the countries which were part of Warsaw Pact had been denied any significant level of control over their own national affairs. And thus their government were weakened, their economies were robbed, and their societies were fractured. This was the legacy that Warsaw Pact basically left behind. And fortunately for these countries, Warsaw Pact was disbanded, and these countries then got the freedom to decide their own fate, to decide their own international policy. So I hope you understood about the particular concept of the Warsaw Pact and overall different dimensions. If you like the video, please hit the like button, share it with your fellow aspirants, as well as subscribe to our channel for more such helpful content. Thank you very much.